Hi everyone, I'm presenting Wirrng Wirrng, or otherwise known as the Queenscliff Hub. So Wirrng Wirrng is located on the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I wanted to pay my respects. The project is situated in Queenscliff, a few hundred metres from the ocean, and the area at the entry to Port Phillip has been an important strategic marine location for Queenscliff. The site is on Main Street, Hesse Street in Queenscliff. It's a new community hub, so named by Corrina Eccles on behalf of Wadawurrung Traditional Owners after the phrase meaning to listen with both ears. This invitation is reflected in the shared functions of library, museum, visitor information centre and community meeting places. It's a building for learning, listening and communicating, and a reminder from Eccles to listen to country. Queenscliff today is the only borough in Victoria and the smallest local government area. It's a small building as well. It's particularly in the early stages of the project, we undertook a lot of stakeholder engagement as well as community engagement with a very vocal and active community, as well as a very passionate group of stakeholders who've been part of the process since its initial funding. Wadawurrung community members were also consulted at different stages. So our site on Hesse Street housed the Queenscliff Library and Visitor Information Centre on the right-hand side, and then a volunteer-run museum which is set back from the street edge, and Field Park in the front, which acts as an interval between the two significant heritage buildings on Hesse Street, which, if you've been there, is a full street of quite intact heritage buildings. The rear of the site has a significant Moreton Bay fig tree, but otherwise fairly blank facades and wasn't particularly inviting. There is a 1974 building you can see on the left with the windows, which is the one we did try to retain to avoid demolishing if we didn't need to. So this diagram shows the different spectrum of interventions that we did make into the existing fabric. The palest pink is the Heritage Library at the front. We were able to move it back into some of its original rooms at the front. Our new insertion sort of starts right behind its roof, so we tried to subtly redefine its original footprint. The middle pink is the 1974 building, which we edited more heavily. It had fairly low heritage value. And then our new construction is completely to the north. One of our really early design concepts was for this breezeway, which acts as a visual gap between the heritage building and the new building, and the build form makes a series of outdoor spaces. So the formal street park to the front, there's a protected courtyard that leads you into the building and that the building can spill out into, and then the rear garden, which revegetates underneath the Moreton Bay fig tree and is a more informal, quiet space. And then there's a circulation spine connecting all the different program in the building. Apologies. The change in height across the site has been leveraged to occupy the canopy of the fig tree, so really getting up amongst the leaves, and to create an opportunistic undercroft spill-out space at the lower level. The breezeway spine opens up to spill into the courtyard in good weather, and as you can see, its transparency creates a really good gap between the heritage and the new building. Our new building is also set back behind the park to retain that interval between the heritage buildings on the streetscape to maintain the primacy of those heritage buildings. And the height of our new building mass is set below the adjacent heritage buildings as well. Elaine Human-Gurian talks about the potential of museums to be catalytic community placemakers. They're for gathering, research, celebration of culture and making new connections. The cultural functions of libraries and information centres further align with this purpose. And as Corrina Eccles reminds with the building name, they are also spaces that are about listening and learning. This richness of community activity can be hard to read through a necessarily closed museum façade, especially a small volunteer-run museum with limited opening hours. So we made a simple 24-hour museum by introducing peepholes as a playful facade engagement strategy, allowing a peek into history at any time of day. So they're dotted across the facade, and they contain artefacts or digital displays which they can move around and change as they want to. The entire street park, in fact, can be conceptualised as a museum of cultural artefacts. Heritage buildings, heritage street furniture are all preserved. There's the living heritage of the trees, and we reintroduced a lot more local plant species, particularly in the revegetation of the rear. A new interpretive plinth is to be designed by a Wadawurrung artist, which is still in process, and that's going to mark the main entry to the site. The serrated glazing is an oblique reference to the maritime history of the area, celebration of the Fresnel lens, and it also has really lovely light effects and reflects the heritage buildings either side of it. Bus stop bins, seats, signage and water station are organised into a series of bespoke furniture elements that define the footpath and building edges. The main entry to the building is through an airlock, or you can open up the breezeway for more informal entries and event spill out. The Visitor Information Centre has been put into the heart of the space and can also use the circulation spine as needed. The library is in its historic location with its entry reorientated to the new spine for their functional purposes. The museum's to the north, where it can get better security, lack of daylight and climate control. Then we have a series of community spaces, so a shared multi-purpose room, shared staff areas and public toilets, none of which the organisations on their own would have been able to provide, so by co-locating they can share these. The lower floors are smaller footprint, so some museum storage and just showing that undercroft space that can be used for outdoor learning. Spill out. So I'll do a very quick building tour. So front, we can see the shadows across the front facade from the trees, the breezeway opening up and the entry off to the left. Looking back, you can see a peek into the entry, which has a little mini cabinet of curiosities when you get in. So another way to bring the museum out into the main spaces. This is our Visitor Information Centre to the left and through to the multi-purpose spaces. We used a predominantly black butt timber interior as a local timber species, and to contrast the more robust fire-protected exterior. This is from the auditorium space looking back through to the Visitor Information Centre, and then on the right you can see out towards the fig tree. On the left is the library. On the right is the museum. The museum did their own displays, so we provided the warm shell for them. This is a shot of the rear. You can see the undercroft space on the right, and over time that landscape will grow up a lot and revegetate and really soften up. Final slide with some architects just enjoying the breezeway.